The desert wind carried sand that stung like tiny needles against exposed skin. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Ghost Rodriguez adjusted his position behind the rocky outcrop, feeling the familiar weight of his 13 Malawian Quachas sniper rifle settle into the groove worn by countless hours of training. 300 meters ahead, the compound sat silent in the pre-dawn darkness, its mud brick walls casting long shadows under the pale moonlight. Rodriguez had been in this exact spot for 6 hours, watching, waiting, calculating. His spotter, Petty Officer Jake Eyes Morrison, lay beside him with the spotting scope pressed against his face. Neither man had spoken in over an hour. Words weren't needed between operators who had worked together for 3 years across 4 different theaters of operation. The mission briefing had been straightforward enough. High-value target, confirmed location, narrow window of opportunity. What made this operation different was the precision required. Intelligence indicated that Hassan al-Mansuri, a key bomb maker responsible for over 30 attacks against coalition forces, would be meeting with his weapons supplier at exactly 0630 hours. The meeting would last no more than 15 minutes before both men disappeared back into the maze of safe houses that dotted the region. Rodriguez shifted slightly, feeling the familiar ache in his left shoulder where shrapnel from an IED blast 2 years earlier had left its permanent mark. The wound had healed, but the reminder stayed with him during long periods of stillness. He welcomed the discomfort now. It kept him sharp, focused on the task ahead. Through his scope, he could see the compound's main building. 2 stories, flat roof, single entrance facing east toward the rising sun. Intelligence photos showed 3 rooms on the ground floor and a small office on the second level where the meeting would take place. Window facing northwest, approximately 18 inches wide, 4 feet tall. Clear line of sight from his current position. Morrison tapped his arm twice. Movement. Rodriguez shifted his attention to the scope's field of view. A figure emerged from the building's shadow, walking with the careful steps of someone checking for threats. The man wore traditional robes but moved with military precision. Private security, most likely former Iraqi army. The figure completed a quick perimeter check before returning to the entrance. Prep phase complete, Morrison whispered into his throat mic, target area secure. The response crackled through their earpieces immediately. Roger, eyes. Maintain overwatch. Primary inbound, ETA 12 minutes. Rodriguez felt his heart rate slow to its operational rhythm. This was the zone where time stretched and compressed simultaneously, where hours of preparation condensed into seconds of execution. He had made shots like this before, but never with such tight constraints. The target would be visible for perhaps 30 seconds through the window. Maybe less. He closed his eyes and ran through the calculation one more time. Wind speed steady at 4 knots from the southwest. Temperature rising as the sun climbed higher, affecting air density. Rangefinder confirmed 297 meters to target. Elevation difference minimal. The bullet would fly for just under half a second before impact. The 13 Malawian Quachas felt familiar in his hands, like a tool he had been born to use. Rodriguez had qualified as a Navy marksman 8 years ago, but real precision came from thousands of rounds fired in training and dozens of missions where failure meant his teammates died. This rifle had been with him through 3 deployments. He knew exactly how it would behave when the moment came. Morrison adjusted his position slightly, keeping the spotting scope trained on the compound. Vehicle approaching from the south. 2 occupants visible. Rodriguez opened his eyes and found his target zone through the scope. The window remained dark, but shadows moved inside the building. Soon, the vehicle stopped 50 meters from the compound entrance. A man stepped out, scanning the area before walking toward the building. Even at this distance, Rodriguez could see the confident stride of someone accustomed to being the most dangerous person in any room. Hassan al-Mansuri had survived 6 years of the most intensive manhunt in modern military history. He didn't survive by being careless. Positive ID on primary target, Morrison reported. Entering building now. Rodriguez felt his breathing settle into the pattern that preceded every shot. 4 counts in, hold for 2, 4 counts out. His finger found the trigger guard but didn't enter. Not yet. The target would need to be positioned exactly right, and he would have only one opportunity. Minutes passed like hours. The sun continued its climb, changing the light and shadow patterns around the compound. Rodriguez made tiny adjustments to his position, maintaining perfect sight alignment while his body remained completely still. Years of training had taught him to become part of the landscape, invisible to anyone who might be watching. Movement in the window. A figure passed by quickly, too fast for identification. Then, another. Rodriguez felt the familiar tightening in his chest that preceded action. His finger moved to the trigger, taking up the slack without applying pressure. Two figures in target area, Morrison whispered. Stand by for positive ID. The shadows in the window shifted as someone moved closer to the opening. Rodriguez could see part of a face through his scope, but the angle wasn't right for confirmation. The target needed to move 3 feet to the left and turn toward the window. A hand appeared at the window's edge, gesturing to someone inside the room. The movement was animated, urgent. Rodriguez tracked the motion through his scope, waiting for the moment when the target would be fully exposed. Wind shift, Morrison said quietly. Now 5 knots southwest. Rodriguez made the mental adjustment without moving the rifle. The bullet would drift slightly more than expected. He compensated by moving his point of aim 2 inches to the right of where his target would appear. The figure in the window moved again, and this time Rodriguez caught a clear profile. High forehead, distinctive beard, scar running along the left cheek. Hassan al-Mansouri, exactly as he appeared in the intelligence photos. But the angle still wasn't perfect. The target stood sideways to the window, presenting a narrow profile. Rodriguez needed him to turn toward the opening, exposing his center mass for a clean shot. Anything less than perfect placement might only wound the target, allowing him to escape and disappear for months or years. Minutes stretched longer. Rodriguez maintained his sight picture while sweat gathered under his gear despite the cool morning air. The target moved in and out of view, sometimes visible for several seconds, other times disappearing completely. Each appearance brought the possibility of the perfect shot, but the angle remained wrong. Morrison shifted beside him. Second vehicle approaching. Multiple occupants. Through his scope, Rodriguez saw the dust cloud before the vehicle became visible. Someone else was arriving at the compound, someone not included in the intelligence briefing. The mission was changing in real time, and they had to adapt. Control, this is Ghost. Additional personnel arriving on site. Request updated guidance. The radio remained silent for 30 seconds before crackling to life. Ghost, control. Maintain position and mission focus. Primary target remains priority. Rodriguez understood the message. The mission continued regardless of complications. But additional personnel meant additional security, additional lookouts, additional chances for detection. His window of opportunity was shrinking. The new vehicle stopped beside the first one. 4 men emerged, moving with the controlled urgency of professional soldiers. They took positions around the compound's perimeter while 1 man entered the building. Whatever was happening inside had just become much more important. Elevated threat level, Morrison observed. Multiple armed personnel visible. Rodriguez tracked the new arrivals through his scope while keeping his primary focus on the target window. The additional security would make extraction more difficult, but that was a problem for later. Right now, his job remained simple: wait for the perfect shot and take it. The target appeared in the window again, this time facing partially toward Rodriguez's position. The angle was better but still not ideal. Rodriguez could see most of the target's torso, but a shot at this angle risked hitting bone and deflecting. He needed the target to turn another 15 degrees toward the window. As if responding to his thoughts, Hassan al-Mansouri stepped closer to the window opening. The morning sun hit his face directly, and Rodriguez could see every detail through the scope. The target was talking to someone inside the room, gesturing with both hands in animated conversation. Perfect sight picture, Morrison whispered. Target fully exposed. Rodriguez's finger found the trigger. His breathing slowed to nothing. The crosshairs settled on the target's center mass, accounting for wind drift and the slight upward angle. Everything else disappeared: the discomfort in his shoulder, the heat building under his gear, the awareness of hostile forces moving around the compound. There was only the target, the crosshairs, and the trigger. But Rodriguez didn't fire. Something was wrong. The target's body language had changed. Instead of the relaxed confidence he had shown earlier, Hassan al-Mansuri now moved with the jerky alertness of someone who sensed danger. His head turned frequently toward the window, and his hands moved to check something at his waist. Target showing signs of awareness, Rodriguez whispered into his throat mic, possible compromise. Morrison kept his eye pressed to the spotting scope. Negative movement from security personnel. Target appears isolated. But Rodriguez trusted his instincts more than visual confirmation. Something had changed in the last few seconds. Maybe it was the way the target held his shoulders, or how his eyes seemed to search the landscape beyond the compound. Professional paranoia developed over years of survival was telling Hassan al-Mansuri that death was close. The target stepped away from the window. Rodriguez maintained his sight picture on the empty opening, knowing the target might return. But seconds stretched into a full minute with no movement. The perfect shot had passed, and it might not come again. Control, this is Ghost. Target has moved away from the window. Maintaining overwatch. Roger, Ghost. Intelligence indicates meeting duration 15 minutes maximum. Target should return to window position. Rodriguez hoped the intelligence was accurate, but operational experience had taught him to prepare for the unexpected. Hassan al-Mansuri had survived this long by trusting his instincts, and those instincts were apparently telling him to stay away from windows. Movement inside the building suggested the meeting was continuing, but the target remained out of sight. Rodriguez held his position, knowing that patience was as important as marksmanship in situations like this. The target would eventually have to show himself again, either at the window or somewhere else in the compound. 20 minutes passed. The sun climbed higher, changing shadows and light patterns around the compound. The additional security personnel remained at their posts, but their alertness seemed to be decreasing as time went on. No immediate threats had materialized, and human nature was making them complacent. Morrison tapped Rodriguez's arm again. Movement in the building. This time, a different figure appeared at the window. Older man, gray beard, expensive-looking robes. The weapons supplier, most likely. He stood directly in the window opening for several seconds before stepping aside. Hassan al-Mansuri appeared beside him. Both men were now visible through the scope, standing side by side in perfect view. Rodriguez felt his breathing settle into the pre-shot rhythm automatically. His finger found the trigger as he confirmed wind speed and made final adjustments to his point of aim. 2 targets in window, Morrison confirmed. Clear shot available. But Rodriguez hesitated. The intelligence briefing had specified Hassan al-Mansuri as the primary target, but eliminating both men would significantly damage the bomb-making network. However, a shot at the weapons supplier might alert the primary target and allow him to escape. The decision took less than 2 seconds. Hassan al-Mansuri remained the priority. The weapons supplier could be tracked and targeted later, but opportunities to eliminate the bomb-maker were rare and precious. Rodriguez settled his crosshairs on Hassan al-Mansuri's center mass. The target stood facing partially toward the window, presenting an ideal angle for maximum effect. Range confirmed, wind accounted for, breathing controlled. His finger began the slow, steady pressure on the trigger that would send a 7.62 mm round across 300 meters in less than half a second. But just as the trigger reached its breaking point, Hassan al-Mansuri stepped backward into the shadows. Rodriguez held his pressure on the trigger without firing. The target was no longer visible, and shooting blindly into the room would accomplish nothing except alerting everyone in the compound to his presence. He eased off the trigger and waited. This time, the target didn't return to the window. Minutes passed with no movement, and Rodriguez began to suspect the meeting was ending. Intelligence had estimated 15 minutes maximum, and nearly 20 had already passed. Vehicle starting, Morrison reported. Preparing to depart. Through his scope, Rodriguez could see activity around the compound's entrance. The additional security personnel were moving toward their vehicle, and someone was giving rapid instructions. The meeting was definitely over. Hassan al-Mansouri emerged from the building's main entrance, walking quickly toward his waiting vehicle. He moved with purpose but without obvious panic, suggesting he wasn't aware of the immediate threat. But he also didn't pause or look around, indicating he wanted to leave the area as soon as possible. Rodriguez tracked him through the scope as he approached the vehicle. Clear shot, perfect angle, no obstructions. But taking the shot now would mean engaging at ground level with multiple armed personnel nearby. The mission parameters had specifically called for a precision shot from concealment, minimizing risk to the operators. Clear shot on primary target, Morrison whispered. Ground level, approximately 40 meters from building. Rodriguez kept his crosshairs on the target while calculating risks and probabilities. The shot itself wasn't difficult, but the aftermath would be complicated. For armed men would immediately begin searching for the shooter's position. Escape and evasion would be challenging with hostile forces in active pursuit. But this might be the only opportunity they would get. Intelligence had tracked Hassan al-Mansouri for 6 months before locating this meeting. Another chance might not come for years, if ever. Rodriguez made his decision. His finger found the trigger as Hassan al-Mansouri reached for his vehicle's door handle. The target paused for a moment, looking back toward the compound as if he had forgotten something. The pause put him in perfect profile, completely exposed, with no cover or concealment nearby. Rodriguez's breathing stopped. His finger began the trigger pressure that would end one of the most successful bomb makers in the region. Everything else faded away, the heat, the discomfort, the awareness of hostile forces nearby. There was only the target, the crosshairs, and the inevitable moment when precision and preparation would combine to complete the mission. The trigger reached its breaking point. But, instead of the sharp crack of the rifle firing, Rodriguez heard something else entirely, the distant sound of helicopter rotors approaching from the south. Rodriguez eased his finger off the trigger as the helicopter sound grew louder. Hassan al-Mansouri heard it too, his head snapping up toward the sky with the instant alertness of someone who had survived too many close calls. The target abandoned his vehicle and ran back toward the compound entrance, shouting orders to his security team. Control, this is Ghost. Unidentified rotary wing aircraft approaching from the south. Request immediate clarification. The radio crackled with interference before a different voice came through, calm and professional. Ghost, be advised friendly QRF inbound to your location. Mission parameters unchanged. Maintain focus on primary target. Rodriguez felt a cold knot form in his stomach. Quick reaction force meant something had gone wrong somewhere else, badly enough to require immediate helicopter support. But the order was clear: complete the mission regardless of complications. Through his scope, he watched Hassan al-Mansouri disappear into the building while his security team took defensive positions around the compound. Whatever element of surprise they had possessed was now completely gone. The target knew hostile forces were in the area, even if he didn't know exactly where. Morrison shifted beside him, keeping the spotting scope trained on the building. Target back inside. Multiple personnel moving to defensive positions. This is about to get complicated. The helicopter sound grew louder until Rodriguez could identify the distinctive wop-wop of twin-rotor blades. CH-47 Chinook, most likely carrying a full squad of infantry with support weapons. Whatever crisis had prompted their deployment was significant enough to risk a daylight insertion in hostile territory. Rodriguez maintained his position and sight picture while analyzing the changing tactical situation. The original mission plan called for a precision shot followed by quiet extraction under cover of darkness. But dawn had already broken, the target was now alert and protected, and friendly forces were about to conduct a combat insertion nearby. Multiple vehicles approaching from the east, Morrison reported. Count 6 technicals with mounted weapons. Estimate 30 to 40 personnel. The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly.
Hassan al-Mansuri's paranoia had apparently included contingency plans for exactly this type of scenario.
He had backup forces positioned close enough to respond within minutes, turning a precision sniper mission into a potential full-scale battle.
Rodriguez keyed his throat mic control. This is Ghost. Target is secure inside building with significant backup forces arriving. Request permission to adjust mission parameters. Ghost, control. Negative on parameter adjustment. Primary target remains priority. Complete mission and extract to secondary LZ. The response made Rodriguez's jaw tighten.
Command was ordering him to continue a mission that had already shifted far beyond its original scope. But orders were orders, and Hassan al-Mansuri remained one of the highest value targets in the theater. If there was any possibility of completing the mission, he had to take it. The Chinook appeared over the southern ridge, flying fast and low toward a landing zone approximately 2 kilometers from their position. Dust clouds marked its approach as it settled into a hover before disgorging its cargo of infantry. Rodriguez could see figures spreading out from the helicopter even before it touched down completely. Friendly forces on deck, Morrison observed.
Looks like Rangers. Full combat load.
Rodriguez nodded without taking his eye from the scope. Rangers meant the QRF was equipped and trained for serious combat operations.
Whatever had prompted their deployment wasn't a minor incident requiring light support. But their presence also meant Hassan al-Mansuri would be even more motivated to escape the area as quickly as possible.
The compound below had transformed into a defensive position within minutes. Armed men took cover behind vehicles and walls while someone inside the building coordinated their response over radio.
Rodriguez could see weapons being distributed and ammunition checked with the efficiency of experienced fighters.
But Hassan al-Mansuri remained inside the building, presumably safe from sniper fire but also trapped until the situation stabilized.
Rodriguez needed him to move, to present a target outside the building's protection.
And, for that to happen, the target would need to feel confident enough about his security to risk exposure. The incoming vehicles arrived at the compound in a cloud of dust and exhaust smoke. Men jumped from truck beds and took positions while their commanders assessed the threat level. Within minutes, the compound had gone from a meeting location to a fortified position manned by over 60 armed fighters. Rodriguez studied the defensive positions through his scope, looking for weaknesses and opportunities.
The fighters showed good tactical discipline, using cover effectively and establishing interlocking fields of fire.
But they were also focused on external threats, primarily the direction where the Ranger QRF had landed.
That gave him an idea. Eyes, you see the positioning of their security? Morrison adjusted his spotting scope to scan the compound's perimeter. Yeah.
Concentrated on the south and east approaches. Light coverage on the northwest side where we are. They're expecting a conventional assault from the direction of friendly forces.
They're not thinking about precision fire from concealment.
Rodriguez began calculating angles and possibilities. If Hassan al-Mansuri felt secure enough in his defensive position, he might risk moving to coordinate with his forces. The building had a roof access point that would give him an overview of the tactical situation while still providing some protection.
Target might use roof access to observe friendly forces, Rodriguez whispered into his throat mic, maintaining overwatch on building summit.
Roger, Ghost. Be advised Ranger element is beginning movement toward your area.
ETA 15 minutes. 15 minutes.
Rodriguez felt the familiar time compression that occurred when multiple tactical factors converged simultaneously. The Rangers would force Hassan al-Mansuri to make decisions about escape routes and defensive priorities.
Those decisions might create the opportunity Rodriguez needed. Movement on the compound's roof confirmed his analysis.
A figure emerged from a stairwell access point, staying low but moving toward the building's edge for a better view of the approaching threat.
Even at 300 meters, Rodriguez could identify the distinctive profile and movement pattern of his target. Hassan al-Mansuri was on the roof, partially exposed, scanning the southern horizon with binoculars. Rodriguez settled into a shooting position with renewed focus.
The target was 70 feet above ground level, standing behind a low parapet that provided cover from direct assault but left him exposed to elevated shooting positions.
The angle was perfect for a precision shot from Rodriguez's location. Target on roof, Morrison confirmed. Partial exposure behind eastern parapet. Clean shot available.
Rodriguez found his target through the scope and began his pre-shot sequence. Wind speed had increased to 6 knots from the southwest as the day warmed.
Range to target was now 310 meters due to the elevation difference.
The target stood in profile, using binoculars to observe Ranger movements to the south. His finger found the trigger as he confirmed his sight picture.
This time, Hassan al-Mansouri was completely focused on the external threat. He wasn't scanning for snipers or showing signs of awareness about his vulnerability. The professional paranoia that had kept him alive was concentrated in the wrong direction. Rodriguez's breathing settled into the controlled rhythm that preceded every precision shot. 4 counts in, hold for 2, 4 counts out.
His heart rate slowed to its operational minimum while his finger took up trigger slack without applying firing pressure. The crosshairs settled on Hassan al-Mansouri's center mass, accounting for wind drift and the slight downward angle. Through the scope, Rodriguez could see details of the target's equipment and clothing: tactical vest over traditional robes, radio headset, pistol in a shoulder holster. The man who had killed hundreds with carefully crafted explosive devices was about to become the victim of precisely applied military technology.
Perfect sight picture, Morrison whispered.
Target stationary and exposed. Rodriguez began the steady trigger pressure that would launch a 7.62 mm round across the desert at over 2,500 feet per second. The bullet would cover the distance to target in less than half a second, arriving before the sound of the shot could provide any warning. But, just as the trigger reached its breaking point, Hassan al-Mansouri moved. Instead of the careful, predictable movement of someone observing through binoculars, the target suddenly dropped behind the parapet as if he had been pushed. Rodriguez held his fire, realizing that something had alerted his target to the immediate danger. Target down behind cover, Morrison reported.
Possible detection of our position.
Rodriguez maintained his sight picture on the area where Hassan al-Mansouri had disappeared, knowing he might reappear at any moment. But seconds stretched into minutes with no movement above the parapet line. The target had either detected the sniper threat or been warned by someone who had.
Through his scope, Rodriguez could see increased activity among the defensive forces below.
Men were pointing toward the northwest, in the general direction of his position. Someone had spotted something, a reflection from his scope, a movement in his hide sight, or simply noticed the perfect sight line from the rocky outcrop to the building.
Multiple personnel orienting toward our position, Morrison observed. Possible compromise.
Rodriguez knew they had perhaps 2 minutes before organized search teams would begin moving in their direction. The mission was failing, and continuing to hold position would risk capture or elimination. But Hassan al-Mansouri was still on that roof, probably planning his next movement.
Control, this is Ghost. Position may be compromised. Target is on building roof behind cover. Request immediate guidance. Ghost, Control. Rangers are 3 minutes from target building. Maintain position until friendly forces engage. Complete mission during chaos of assault.
The plan was risky but logical. When the Rangers began their assault, Hassan al-Mansouri would be forced to move, either to coordinate his defense or to attempt escape. Either option might provide the exposure Rodriguez needed for a clean shot. The sound of approaching vehicles from the south confirmed the Ranger advance. Rodriguez could see dust clouds marking their movement as they closed on the compound from multiple directions. The assault would begin within minutes, and the tactical situation would become extremely fluid. Hassan al-Mansouri appeared above the parapet again, this time holding a radio and speaking urgently to someone. His focus was entirely on the approaching threat, and his body language suggested growing desperation. The defensive position that had seemed so strong minutes earlier was about to be tested by professional infantry assault. Rodriguez settled his crosshairs on the target once more. This would likely be his final opportunity before the compound erupted in gunfire and chaos.
Hassan al-Mansuri stood in clear view, his attention divided between multiple threats and radio communications with his dispersed forces. Clear shot, Morrison confirmed. Target fully exposed and distracted. Rodriguez began his trigger pressure for the third time, feeling the familiar stillness that preceded precision fire. His breathing stopped, his heart rate dropped, and everything beyond the scope's field of view disappeared from consciousness. The crosshairs held steady on Hassan al-Mansuri's center mass. Wind speed calculated, range confirmed, angle compensated. 310 meters of desert air lay between the muzzle of Rodriguez's rifle and the man who had killed hundreds of innocent people with carefully crafted bombs. His finger reached the trigger's breaking point. The rifle fired. The sharp crack of the shot echoed across the desert as the bullet raced toward its target at over 2,500 feet per second. Rodriguez maintained his sight picture through the recoil, watching for impact and effect on target. But, instead of the target dropping as expected, Rodriguez saw Hassan al-Mansuri stumble sideways and grab his left shoulder. The bullet had hit him, but not where Rodriguez had aimed. At the moment of firing, the target had turned slightly to respond to someone calling from below, presenting his side instead of his center mass. Target hit but mobile, Morrison reported. Shoulder wound, not fatal. Rodriguez worked the bolt action to chamber another round while keeping his scope trained on the wounded target. Hassan al-Mansuri was still on his feet, clutching his shoulder but moving toward the roof access point. He was wounded and slowed, but very much alive and attempting to escape. Second shot available, Rodriguez muttered, settling his crosshairs on the moving target. But before he could fire again, the compound exploded in gunfire as the Rangers began their assault. Tracers flew across the courtyard while explosive breaching charges blew open the main entrance. Hassan al-Mansuri disappeared down the roof access stairwell just as Rodriguez's second shot sailed through the space where he had been standing. Target has entered building, Morrison said. Rangers are inside the perimeter. Rodriguez felt the familiar frustration of a mission that had achieved partial success. Hassan al-Mansuri was wounded, possibly seriously, but he was alive and probably escaping through prepared routes inside the building. The precision shot that should have ended the threat had become the opening round of a much larger battle. Gunfire erupted from multiple positions around the compound as Hassan al-Mansuri's defenders engaged the advancing Rangers. Rodriguez could see muzzle flashes from windows and doorways while smoke from explosions began obscuring parts of the battlefield. Control, this is Ghost. Primary target is wounded but mobile. He's inside the building complex. Rangers are engaged with defensive forces. Roger, Ghost. Maintain overwatch and provide precision fire support for Ranger assault. Secondary mission is target elimination or capture. Rodriguez adjusted his scope to scan for targets among the defensive forces. His primary mission had failed, but he could still contribute to the overall success of the operation by eliminating key defenders and supporting the Ranger assault. Through his scope, he identified a heavy machine gun position on the compound's eastern wall that was causing problems for the advancing infantry. The gunner was partially protected by sandbags but exposed enough for a precision shot. Rodriguez settled his crosshairs and fired, watching the gunner slump forward as his weapon fell silent. Enemy machine gun neutralized, Morrison reported into his radio. Rodriguez continued scanning for targets while keeping part of his attention focused on the building where Hassan al-Mansuri had disappeared. The structure had multiple exits, and, wounded or not, the target might attempt to escape during the confusion of the assault. The Rangers advanced through the compound with professional efficiency, clearing buildings room by room while suppressing defensive fire with overwhelming firepower. But the defenders fought with the desperation of men who knew capture meant certain death, and progress was measured in meters rather than rapid advancement. 15 minutes into the assault, Rodriguez spotted movement at a small window on the building's ground floor. A figure appeared briefly before disappearing back into the shadows. The movement was wrong for a Ranger assault team, too careful and deliberate for someone advancing under fire. Possible target movement, northwest corner of main building, Rodriguez reported into his throat. Mike Morrison adjusted his spotting scope to cover the indicated area. Confirmed movement. Single individual, appears to be moving toward rear exit. Rodriguez shifted his rifle to cover the building's back entrance, knowing that Hassan al-Mansuri would eventually have to emerge from the structure. The assault had cut off most escape routes, but the building's rear faced away from the main Ranger advance and might seem like the safest option to a desperate fugitive. The rear door opened slowly, and a figure emerged cautiously. Even at distance, Rodriguez could see the blood-stained left shoulder of his shirt and the careful way he moved to avoid aggravating his wound. Hassan al-Mansuri was attempting to escape while the Rangers focused on clearing the front of the building. Rodriguez settled his crosshairs on the figure and began his pre-shot sequence. This time, the target was moving slowly and, predictably, following a wall that provided concealment from the main battle but left him exposed to Rodriguez's elevated position. The range was slightly longer now, approximately 330 meters, but the target was moving in a straight line that made tracking simple. Target confirmed at building rear, Morrison whispered. Clear shot, no friendly forces in the area. Rodriguez's finger found the trigger as Hassan al-Mansuri moved along the wall toward what appeared to be a hidden vehicle position. The target was focused on his escape route and showed no awareness of the sniper threat that had wounded him minutes earlier. This shot would be different from the first. The target was wounded and moving slowly, presenting a larger profile for a longer period. Rodriguez had time to ensure perfect sight alignment and trigger control. There would be no rushed shot, no unexpected target movement, no external factors to interfere with precision. His breathing settled into the controlled rhythm one final time. The crosshairs tracked Hassan al-Mansuri's movement with mechanical precision, leading the target by exactly the right amount to account for his walking speed. Wind conditions remained steady, and the range was well within the capabilities of both rifle and shooter. Rodriguez began his trigger pressure as Hassan al-Mansuri approached the corner of the building where his escape vehicle waited. In 10 more steps, the target would be around the corner and out of sight, probably forever. This was the moment that 6 months of intelligence gathering and planning had been designed to create. The crosshairs held steady on center mass. Rodriguez's finger reached the trigger's breaking point just as Hassan al-Mansuri stopped walking and turned to look back toward the battle raging around the compound. For a brief moment, the target stood perfectly still, silhouetted against the light-colored wall behind him. Rodriguez could see his face clearly through the scope, the expression of a man who realized he had escaped death by the narrowest possible margin and was now calculating his next moves. The rifle fired. This time, Rodriguez saw the bullet's impact exactly where he had aimed it. Hassan al-Mansuri dropped immediately, his escape plans ending 330 meters away at the precise moment military precision overcame terrorist luck. Rodriguez kept his scope trained on Hassan al-Mansuri's motionless form for 30 seconds, confirming the target was eliminated before shifting his attention back to the ongoing battle. The precision shot had ended the primary mission, but the Rangers were still engaged with defensive forces throughout the compound. Control, this is Ghost. Primary target is down. Confirmed elimination. Outstanding, Ghost. Maintain overwatch and provide fire support for Ranger elements. Extraction coordinates will follow. Morrison lowered his spotting scope and began scanning the battlefield with his naked eye. Rangers have the main building. Looks like they're starting to clear the remaining structures. Rodriguez worked the bolt action to chamber another round while surveying the tactical situation below. The compound that had seemed so formidable an hour earlier was now largely under American control. Sporadic gunfire continued from a few defensive positions, but organized resistance was collapsing as Rangers systematically cleared each building. Through his scope, Rodriguez identified a sniper position on a water tower approximately 400 meters southeast of the compound. The enemy marksman was engaging Rangers from an elevated position that gave him clear sightlines across most of the courtyard. Enemy sniper, water tower southeast, Rodriguez reported into his throat mic, engaging now. He adjusted his scope for the increased range and began calculating the shot parameters. The target was partially concealed behind the water tower's metal framework, presenting only brief opportunities when he emerged to fire at Rangers below. Rodriguez would need perfect timing to catch him during one of these exposures. The enemy sniper fired again, and Rodriguez saw the muzzle flash through his scope. The target's position was now confirmed,
and Rodriguez had a clear understanding of his shooting rhythm. The enemy marksman was firing approximately every 20 seconds, giving Rodriguez multiple opportunities to time his shot. Rodriguez settled his crosshairs on the area where the target would appear and waited for the next exposure. His breathing controlled, finger ready on the trigger, everything calculated and prepared for the moment when the enemy sniper would present himself for the final time. 18 seconds after the previous shot, the target emerged from behind the water tower framework to acquire a new aim point on the Rangers below. Rodriguez's rifle fired at the exact moment the enemy sniper's head and shoulders became visible. The 7.62mm round covered 400 meters in just over half a second, striking the target center mass and sending him tumbling from the water tower platform. Rodriguez watched him fall through the scope, confirming the elimination before scanning for additional threats. Enemy sniper neutralized, Morrison reported to the Ranger commander. Water tower is clear. The compound was now effectively under complete control. Rodriguez could see Rangers moving freely between buildings while medics worked on wounded personnel near the main entrance. The defensive forces that had seemed so dangerous an hour earlier had been eliminated or scattered by superior training and overwhelming firepower. Rodriguez began the careful process of preparing his position for extraction. The mission was complete, but they were still deep in hostile territory with a significant distance to travel before reaching friendly lines. The precision shots that had eliminated Hassan al-Mansuri and the enemy sniper had also revealed their location to anyone monitoring the battle. Morrison was already packing the spotting scope and preparing their gear for movement. Years of partnership had taught both men to work efficiently without discussion when time was critical. Within 5 minutes, they would be ready to move toward the extraction point. "Ghost, this is Ranger 6, came a new voice over the radio. Outstanding work on both targets. We're preparing to extract intelligence materials from the compound. Can you provide overwatch for another 20 minutes? Rodriguez keyed his throat mic while continuing to scan for threats through his scope. Roger, Ranger 6. We can maintain position for 20 minutes, then, we need to displace to extraction coordinates. The Rangers were now conducting the careful search for documents, computers, and other intelligence materials that had been the secondary objective of the mission. Hassan al-Mansuri's elimination was significant, but the information in his compound might reveal the locations of other bomb makers and planned attacks. Through his scope, Rodriguez watched Rangers emerge from buildings carrying boxes of papers, computer equipment, and what appeared to be bomb-making materials. The intelligence haul looked substantial enough to disrupt terrorist operations across the entire region for months or even years. Morrison tapped his arm and pointed toward the horizon. Dust cloud to the east. Multiple vehicles approaching fast. Rodriguez shifted his scope to scan the indicated direction. A convoy of vehicles was approaching the compound at high speed, still several kilometers away but closing rapidly. The distinctive profile of the lead vehicles identified them as military rather than civilian, but whose military remained unclear. Control, this is Ghost. Large convoy approaching from the east, ETA approximately 15 minutes. Request identification. Ghost, Control. Negative friendly forces scheduled for that vector. Assume hostile intent and prepare for engagement. Rodriguez felt his tactical awareness shift into higher gear. Hassan al-Mansuri's organization apparently had additional resources positioned nearby, forces that were now responding to the battle at the compound. The Rangers had perhaps 10 minutes to complete their intelligence gathering before facing a significant counterattack. Ranger 6, this is Ghost. Hostile convoy inbound from the east, count 12 vehicles. Recommend expediting intelligence gathering and preparing defensive positions. Roger, Ghost. We copy hostile convoy. Estimate 20 minutes to complete intelligence gathering. Can you provide early warning on convoy advance? Rodriguez confirmed the mission while Morrison prepared additional ammunition and equipment for extended engagement. The tactical situation had shifted from precision strikes to sustained fire support, and they needed to adapt their equipment and positioning accordingly. Through his scope, Rodriguez began counting and identifying vehicles in the approaching convoy. 12 vehicles total, 4 pickup trucks with mounted machine guns, 2 larger trucks that probably carried infantry, and 6 SUVs of various types. Approximately 60 to 80 personnel, well armed and moving with military precision.
The convoy was following a dirt road that would bring them directly to the compound's main entrance.
But the road also passed within 600 meters of Rodriguez's position, potentially giving him opportunities for precision strikes on key vehicles before they reached the Rangers.
Morrison, what do you think about hitting the convoy leadership before they reached the compound?
Morrison studied the approaching vehicles through binoculars. Lead vehicle looks like command and control.
Taking it out might disrupt their coordination.
Rodriguez nodded and began calculating the parameters for engaging a moving target at extended range. The convoy was traveling at approximately 40 km per hour over rough terrain, making precise shots challenging but not impossible. He would need to time his shots to hit vehicles when they slowed for obstacles or turns in the road. Ranger 6, this is Ghost. I can engage convoy leadership at approximately 600 meters from the compound.
Recommend you use that disruption to complete intelligence gathering and prepare extraction.
Roger, Ghost.
We'll be ready to extract when you engage the convoy.
Rodriguez settled into position for the longest precision shots of his military career. 600 meters at moving targets required perfect calculation of lead time, vehicle speed, and trajectory. But disrupting the convoy's leadership might give the Rangers the time they needed to escape with critical intelligence. The convoy approached the point where the road passed closest to Rodriguez's position. Through his scope, he could see the lead vehicle's occupants, driver, passenger who appeared to be the commander, and a machine gunner in the truck bed. Eliminating the commander would force the convoy to reorganize and possibly delay their assault on the compound. Rodriguez tracked the lead vehicle through his scope, calculating its speed and direction while waiting for the optimal moment to engage. The truck was bouncing over rough terrain but following a predictable path along the established road.
At precisely 610 meters range, Rodriguez fired his first shot at the moving convoy.
The bullet struck the lead vehicle's passenger compartment, and Rodriguez saw the truck swerve violently before coming to a stop. Through his scope, he watched personnel jumping from the vehicle and taking cover while others ran forward to check on the occupants. Direct hit on convoy leadership, Morrison reported.
Convoy has stopped and is taking cover.
Rodriguez was already tracking the second vehicle in line, which had stopped directly behind the first truck. The vehicle's occupants were dismounting and attempting to organize a response to the sniper fire, presenting clear targets for follow-up shots. His second shot eliminated a figure who appeared to be giving orders to the dismounted personnel. The convoy's organization began breaking down as individual vehicles took cover in different directions without coordinated leadership.
Multiple hits on convoy personnel, Rodriguez reported. They're scattered and disorganized. The convoy's response confirmed that Rodriguez had successfully eliminated their command structure.
Instead of continuing their advance toward the compound, the remaining vehicles were spreading out and taking defensive positions along the road. Without leadership, they were reluctant to continue the assault.
Ghost, this is Ranger 6. Outstanding work on convoy disruption.
We're loading final intelligence materials and preparing immediate extraction.
Can you cover our movement to the LZ?
Rodriguez scanned the compound through his scope and saw Rangers moving rapidly toward vehicles while carrying boxes of captured materials. The intelligence gathering operation was complete, and the extraction phase was beginning.
Roger, Ranger 6. We'll provide overwatch during your movement to extraction point. Morrison was already preparing their equipment for immediate displacement once the Rangers cleared the area.
The convoy might reorganize and resume their advance once they realized the sniper fire had stopped, and Rodriguez's position would be vulnerable to coordinated assault. The Rangers completed their extraction from the compound within 8 minutes, their vehicles disappearing over the southern ridge toward the designated landing zone. Rodriguez maintained overwatch until the last vehicle was out of sight before beginning his own preparation for movement.
Control, this is Ghost. Ranger element has successfully extracted with intelligence materials. Beginning movement to secondary extraction point.
Roger, Ghost.
Recovery aircraft is inbound to secondary LZ. ETA 45 minutes.
Rodriguez and Morrison began their careful movement away from the shooting position, using terrain features to mask their withdrawal from any observers in the scattered convoy. The mission had evolved far beyond its original scope, but all primary and secondary objectives had been achieved.
Hassan al-Mansuri was eliminated.
Critical intelligence had been captured. Ranger casualties had been minimized through precision fire support. The bomb-making network that had killed hundreds of coalition personnel and civilians had suffered a devastating blow that would take years to recover from.
But Rodriguez knew that other bomb makers would eventually emerge to replace Hassan al-Mansuri. Other intelligence targets would be identified and tracked.
Other missions would require the same combination of patience, precision, and professional skill that had made this operation successful. As they moved through the desert toward their extraction point, Rodriguez reflected on the complexity of the morning's events. What had begun as a straightforward precision shot had evolved into a multi-phase operation involving coordination with regular infantry, fire support for assault operations, and disruption of enemy counterattacks. Morrison moved ahead, scanning for threats and obstacles while Rodriguez covered their rear with his rifle. The partnership that had developed over 3 years and dozens of operations continued to function smoothly under stress, each man anticipating the other's actions and responsibilities. Aircraft inbound, Morrison reported, pointing toward the southern horizon where a distant speck was growing larger against the morning sky. Rodriguez identified the approaching helicopter as a UH-60 Black Hawk configured for special operations support. The aircraft would extract them to a forward operating base where they could be debriefed and their equipment prepared for the next mission. The helicopters settled into a landing pattern at the designated coordinates while Rodriguez and Morrison moved into position for rapid boarding. Within minutes, they were airborne and heading toward friendly territory, leaving behind the compound where Hassan al-Mansuri's bomb-making career had finally ended. During the flight back to base, Rodriguez cleaned and inspected his rifle while reviewing the morning's events in his mind. The precision shots that had eliminated Hassan al-Mansuri and disrupted the convoy had required every aspect of his training and experience: marksmanship, tactical awareness, equipment knowledge, and the ability to adapt to rapidly changing situations. But, most importantly, the mission had required patience. The willingness to wait hours for the perfect shot, to hold fire when conditions weren't optimal, and to maintain focus despite numerous distractions and complications. Precision wasn't just about marksmanship, it was about waiting for the exact moment when all factors aligned to guarantee success. Hassan al-Mansuri had survived 6 years of the most intensive manhunt in modern military history because he understood the value of patience and preparation. But, in the end, military precision and professional skill had proven superior to terrorist paranoia and criminal experience. The helicopter banked toward the base as Rodriguez began preparing for the detailed debriefing that would follow every aspect of the mission. Intelligence analysts would want to understand exactly how Hassan al-Mansuri had been eliminated, what his security measures had been, and how similar targets might be engaged in the future. But Rodriguez already knew the most important lesson from the morning's operation: precision under pressure required not just technical skill, but the discipline to wait for the perfect moment, even when that moment seemed like it might never come. 3 hours later, Rodriguez sat in a sterile debriefing room at Forward Operating Base Courage, facing a panel of intelligence officers and mission commanders who wanted to understand every detail of the morning's operation. The fluorescent lights felt harsh after hours of natural desert lighting, and the air conditioning made his sweat-soaked gear feel cold and uncomfortable. Major Sarah Chen, the senior intelligence officer, leaned forward across the metal table. "Chief Rodriguez, let's start from the beginning. Walk us through your decision-making process when Hassan al-Mansuri first appeared at the window." Rodriguez organized his thoughts while Morrison sat beside him, both men still wearing their field gear despite the comfortable environment of the base. The transition from combat operations to administrative debriefing always felt jarring, like shifting between two completely different worlds that somehow occupied the same war. "Ma'am, the target appeared at the window at approximately 0642 hours, but his positioning wasn't optimal for a clean shot. He was standing sideways to the opening, presenting a narrow profile that increased the risk of a wounding shot rather than clean elimination." Major Chen made notes on her tablet while the mission commander, Colonel James Harrison, studied satellite photos of the compound. Chief, explain your decision to hold fire during that first opportunity. Rodriguez had expected this question. Mission planners always wanted to understand why operators didn't take available shots, especially when targets proved difficult to engage later. Sir, mission parameters specified elimination with high confidence of success. A shot at that angle carried significant probability of wounding the target without killing him, which would have alerted his security forces and, potentially allowed his escape. But, the target did escape initially after your first shot, interjected Captain Lisa Torres from the analysis section.
How do you reconcile that with your concern about wounding him?
Ma'am, the first shot was taken under optimal conditions when the target presented center mass from an ideal angle. The bullet hit exactly where I aimed, but the target moved at the moment of firing, turning the center mass shot into a shoulder wound.
That movement couldn't have been predicted or compensated for. Colonel Harrison looked up from the satellite photos.
Chief, describe the tactical situation when you engaged the approaching convoy.
That wasn't part of the original mission parameters.
Rodriguez shifted in his chair, remembering the weight of the decision to engage targets at 600 meters while Rangers were still extracting intelligence from the compound. Sir, the convoy represented an immediate threat to Ranger personnel who were completing secondary objectives. Engaging convoy leadership at extended range was the most effective way to disrupt their assault and protect friendly forces.
Major Chen nodded approvingly.
The Ranger commander's report confirms that your engagement bought them the time needed to extract critical intelligence materials.
Can you walk us through the technical aspects of those long-range shots?
Ma'am, engaging moving targets at 600 meters required calculating lead time based on vehicle speed and direction. The convoy was traveling approximately 40 kilometers per hour over rough terrain, which meant leading the target by approximately 8 feet to account for bullet flight time.
Morrison spoke for the first time during the debriefing.
The target vehicles were bouncing over rough road, which made their movements somewhat unpredictable. Ghost had to time his shots for moments when the vehicles were traveling straight and level.
Captain Torres looked interested. Petty Officer Morrison, from your perspective as spotter, how did the extended engagement affect your ability to provide accurate information?
Ma'am, the longer engagement meant tracking multiple targets simultaneously while maintaining awareness of friendly force locations and potential threats to our position. Chief Rodriguez was engaging targets while I was providing updates on convoy movements, Ranger positions, and possible escape routes for our own extraction.
Colonel Harrison stood and walked to a map of the operational area mounted on the wall.
Chief Rodriguez, intelligence analysis of the captured materials has already provided locations of 3 additional bomb-making facilities and identified 12 other high-value targets. Your elimination of Hassan al-Mansuri has disrupted a network that was planning major attacks against civilian and military targets. Rodriguez felt satisfaction at the confirmation that the mission had achieved its strategic objectives, but he also knew that other networks would emerge to replace the one they had disrupted. Sir, Hassan al-Mansuri was skilled and experienced, but he was also paranoid and careful.
His replacement might be less cautious, which could make them easier to track and eliminate.
Major Chen made additional notes before asking her next question.
Chief, let's discuss the technical performance of your equipment. Any issues with rifle, scope, or ammunition during the extended engagement?
Ma'am, the 13 Malawian Quachas performed flawlessly throughout the mission. Scope tracking remained consistent across multiple range changes, and ammunition performance was exactly as expected. The rifle's accuracy at 600 meters met all specifications for precision engagement.
What about environmental factors? Wind, temperature, visibility?
Rodriguez remembered the gradual changes in conditions as the morning progressed from pre-dawn darkness to full daylight. Wind conditions were stable throughout most of the engagement, averaging 5 to 6 knots from the southwest. Temperature increased from approximately 15 degrees Celsius to 25 degrees as the sun rose, which affected air density calculations for the longer shots.
Morrison added his perspective.
Visibility improved steadily as natural light increased, which helped with target identification and range estimation. The spotting scope provided clear images throughout the engagement, even at maximum range.
Captain Torres looked up from her notes. Chief Rodriguez, based on this mission's evolution from precision strike to extended engagement, what recommendations do you have for future operations against similar targets? Rodriguez considered the question carefully.
The mission had succeeded despite numerous complications, but those same complications had revealed potential improvements in planning and execution. Ma'am, I recommend including contingency plans for extended engagement and coordination with conventional forces. This mission succeeded partly because we were able to adapt to changing conditions, but better initial planning could have made adaptation smoother. Elaborate on that recommendation, Colonel Harrison said from his position near the map. Sir, the original mission plan focused on a single precision shot followed by immediate extraction. But high-value targets like Hassan al-Mansuri often have significant security arrangements and backup forces. Future missions should plan for the possibility of extended engagement and coordination with supporting elements.
Major Chen nodded thoughtfully. That's consistent with lessons learned from other precision strike operations.
Targets at this level don't operate in isolation, and eliminating them often requires dealing with their entire support structure. Morrison raised his hand slightly before speaking.
Ma'am, if I may add to Chief Rodriguez's recommendation, communications with supporting elements could be improved.
We had good coordination with the Rangers, but initial coordination with the QRF helicopter could have been smoother.
Explain that observation, Captain Torres requested.
Ma'am, we weren't notified about the incoming QRF until we heard the helicopter approaching. Earlier notification would have allowed us to adjust our planning and possibly coordinate our engagement with their insertion.
Colonel Harrison returned to his seat at the table.
That's a valid point about communications coordination. Intelligence indicated this was a precision strike mission, but operational realities often require adaptation to conventional warfare scenarios. Rodriguez remembered the stress of maintaining focus on Hassan al-Mansuri while helicopter rotors announced the arrival of significant friendly forces. Sir, earlier coordination might have allowed us to use the QRF insertion as a distraction to force the target into better positioning for the precision shot. Major Chen made extensive notes about the communications recommendations before moving to her final questions.
Chief Rodriguez, how do you assess the overall success of the mission? Ma'am, all primary and secondary objectives were achieved.
Hassan al-Mansuri was eliminated, critical intelligence was captured, and friendly casualties were minimized. The mission succeeded despite significant complications and changes to the tactical situation.
And what do you see as the most important factor in that success?
Rodriguez thought about the long hours of waiting, the multiple opportunities that had appeared and disappeared, and the final moment when all factors had aligned for the successful shot. Ma'am, the most important factor was maintaining focus on the primary objective while adapting to changing conditions. Hassan al-Mansuri presented multiple opportunities for engagement, but success required waiting for the optimal moment rather than taking the first available shot.
Morrison nodded agreement.
Chief Rodriguez maintained perfect discipline throughout the engagement, even when external pressures might have encouraged rushed decisions.
Colonel Harrison stood to conclude the debriefing.
Chief Rodriguez, Petty Officer Morrison, excellent work on a complex mission that achieved strategic objectives under difficult conditions.
Your recommendations will be incorporated into future mission planning protocols.
The formal debriefing concluded, but Rodriguez knew that informal analysis would continue for weeks as intelligence officers studied every aspect of the operation. Hassan al-Mansuri's elimination would become a case study in precision warfare, examined by military professionals around the world. As they left the debriefing room, Morrison walked beside Rodriguez toward the barracks where they could finally clean their equipment and rest after the extended operation. Ghost, that was some of the finest precision shooting I've ever witnessed. 600-meter shots on moving targets while coordinating with conventional forces. Rodriguez felt tired satisfaction rather than celebration. It was good shooting, but it was also good luck.
Hassan al-Mansuri made several decisions that gave us opportunities we might not have had against a different target.
Maybe so, but you were ready when those opportunities appeared. That's what separates professionals from amateurs. They walked past other soldiers heading to various missions and duties around the base, men and women who were fighting the same war from different perspectives and specializations. Rodriguez recognized the focused expressions of people preparing for operations and the tired relief of those returning from completed missions. At the barracks, Rodriguez began the methodical process of cleaning and inspecting his rifle while reviewing the mission in his mind. The 13 Malawian Quachas had performed perfectly, but careful maintenance was essential for continued reliability during future operations. Morrison sat on his bunk and began writing the detailed narrative report that would supplement the formal debriefing. Every precision mission required extensive documentation that could be studied by other sniper teams facing similar challenges.
Ghost, you ever think about what comes after all this? Morrison asked while writing.
Rodriguez looked up from cleaning his rifle.
After what? After the war. After the missions.
When we're not tracking high-value targets and making precision shots at 600 meters.
Rodriguez considered the question while applying cleaning solvent to his rifle's bolt assembly. I think about it sometimes. But, right now, there are still targets like Hassan al-Mansouri who need to be eliminated. The job isn't finished. But, it will be finished someday. And, when it is, what happens to skills like yours? Precision shooting at moving targets, tactical patience, the ability to wait hours for the perfect shot? Rodriguez understood what Morrison was asking.
Special operations soldiers often struggled with transitions to civilian life because their specialized skills had limited applications outside military contexts.
Eyes, the skills translate.
Patience, precision, attention to detail, the ability to perform under pressure.
Those abilities are valuable in civilian contexts too. Morrison nodded thoughtfully. I suppose so. But, there's something unique about what we do out here. The responsibility, the precision, the knowledge that people's lives depend on your exact performance.
Rodriguez finished cleaning the bolt assembly and began inspecting the rifle's scope for damage or adjustment drift. That responsibility exists in civilian life too, just in different forms. Doctors, engineers, pilots, teachers, lots of people have jobs where precision and good decisions matter.
True.
But they don't have to make split-second decisions about taking human lives while coordinating with assault forces under enemy fire.
Rodriguez understood Morrison's point.
Military snipers operated in a unique environment that combined technical precision with combat stress and moral responsibility. The combination of skills required for success was rarely duplicated in civilian contexts. Eyes, when the time comes to transition to civilian life, will adapt.
Professional soldiers always do.
But, right now, Hassan al-Mansouri is eliminated, his bomb-making network is disrupted, and dozens of potential victims are safer because of today's mission.
That's what matters.
Morrison completed his narrative report and began preparing his own equipment for cleaning and inspection.
You're right, Ghost. Today was a good day. Hassan al-Mansouri won't be building any more bombs, and the intelligence we captured might prevent other attacks.
Rodriguez finished his equipment maintenance and stored the clean rifle in its case. Tomorrow would bring new missions, new targets, and new challenges that would require the same combination of technical skill and professional discipline that had made today's mission successful. But, tonight, Hassan al-Mansouri was dead, critical intelligence had been captured, and the war against terrorism had taken another step forward.
For professional soldiers, that was enough.
Rodriguez fell asleep thinking about precision, the precise calculations that had made 600-meter shots possible, the precise timing that had allowed coordination with Ranger forces, and the precise moment when Hassan al-Mansouri had stopped to look back at the compound and provided the clear shot that ended his bomb-making career forever.
Precision under pressure.
Technical skill combined with tactical patience. The ability to wait for the perfect moment, even when that moment seemed like it might never come. These were the qualities that separated professional military snipers from ordinary soldiers, and they were the qualities that had made today's mission successful. In his dreams, Rodriguez was back behind his rifle, watching through the scope as targets moved across distant landscapes. But, in his dreams, every shot was perfect, every target was eliminated cleanly, and every mission ended with all friendly forces returning safely to base. The precision that defined his professional life extended even into his subconscious, where muscle memory and tactical awareness continued to function even during rest. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but, tonight, the precision had been perfect.